So now I want to turn to Albert Camus and the myth of Sisyphus. The myth of Sisyphus is an ancient Greek myth, but it's a myth that was revived and reflected upon by Albert Camus, who's a younger contemporary of Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the leading French existentialists. Now, Camus likes the myth of Sisyphus because he sees in it a Greek foreshadowing of a deeply existentialist set of themes. It's a part of the existentialist project that makes it even more difficult, the project that we have already sketched, finding a meaning for life in the world, or in a world rather, in which there is perhaps no God. And that is the fact of human mortality. It's not simply the case that there might be no God in his heaven overlooking, creating us, ensuring that there is ultimate justice, telling us what the meaning of our lives might be. With the death of God comes the possibility that we may not have a soul, right, that is immortal. If there is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is no afterlife. And human beings, as far as we know, are the only creatures who, because of the power of their cognitive faculties, come, usually at a fairly early age, to realize the fact of their own mortality, that at some point they will die. And finding the meaning of life, or reflecting on what the meaning of life might be, that project is made more difficult if we confront the fact that after a few short decades we might die, and so what's the point of living one's life anyway? Now, the myth of Sisyphus is, for Camus, a useful way of approaching this set of issues about mortality and immortality, and that particular dimension's implications for thinking about the meaning of life. Now, the myth of Sisyphus, in case you're needing some brushing up on Greek mythology, Sisyphus was a being a person who defied the gods, and so in punishment was assigned a fairly horrific punishment. He is the one who was told to and made to roll a boulder up a huge hill. The boulder was quite heavy and took all of his power and effort to get it up to the top of the hill. And then every time, as soon as he got it up to the top of the hill, it would roll back down to the bottom of the hill, and he would have to go back down the hill and once again exert all of his effort and power to get the boulder up to the top of the hill, at which point it would roll down again and over and over and over again. Now, when we read this myth and we think about it, it does and should strike us as, wow, that is a really horrible punishment. Nobody would want to be Sisyphus. But what makes it horrible? What makes that punishment cleverly horrible? And when we start to say things like, well, he's just doing the same thing over and over again. He's not getting anywhere. There's a cyclicalness to what Sisyphus is required to do, and it's a cyclicalness that doesn't progress, right? It's not the case that all of his efforts are progressively adding up to some long and lasting sort of achievement. In fact, all of his efforts seem pointless. As soon as he gets the boulder up to the top of the hill, all of that effort is rendered rather immediately meaningless because the boulder just goes back down to the starting point. And it's made worse because Sisyphus, as a conscious and self-conscious being, is aware, as he is rolling the boulder up the hill, that it is going to be pointless, that the boulder is just going to roll down the hill again. And Camus asks us to focus especially on the point at which the boulder has rolled down the hill, and Sisyphus turns around and realizes, okay, here I go again. I have to go down and get myself fired up for rolling the boulder up against the hill. What goes on in Sisyphus's mind at that particular moment? That is a point of the realization of ultimate futility. Now, here we are as human beings. We have our own boulders, right, that we are rolling up the hill. What is our life like? Well, we get up in the morning after sleeping for 7, 8, or 9 hours. That is to say, we're in essentially a dormant state for about 1/3 of our lives. We eat some food, we go off to work. For most people, work is rather a drudgery. They don't particularly enjoy it. They come home, spend a little time with the family, do some laundry, clean up the house a little bit, maybe watch some television, then they go to bed, and the whole cycle starts over and over again. for years and years, and then they retire. And their life is essentially on a decline phase after that. Well, that is, of course, cyclical. Well, what is it all adding up to? And doesn't it seem rather pointless here? Now, here I'm always reminded of my first year in graduate school, where I went to from Canada to a temperate place in southern Indiana for graduate school. And I encountered for the first time in the spring of my first year in graduate school the cicadas. So I had no experience of them coming from a colder climate. And apparently the cicadas that were there were the 7-year cicadas. There are a number of species of cicadas, and what happened was the cicadas came out of dormancy and flew up into the tree, millions and billions of them it seemed, and started to make this obnoxiously loud noise for several days. So I learned something about the life cycle of these cicadas. Apparently what happens is they start their lives as larvae underground in essentially a dormant, very slow metabolizing state for 6 years, just larvae. Spring of the 7th year, they unlarva themselves, whatever that is. They crawl up to the ground, dig their way out, sprout wings. They fly up into the trees. The males and females start making that loud buzzing sound, which is the cicada mating call. Hey baby, I'm over here. So the males and females find each other. They have sex. The male dies. After sex, the female then lives long enough to get back down to the ground to lay the next generation of larvae, and then she dies. And then for the next 6 years, we've just got these larvae underground doing very little. Okay, now, suppose you are, this is science fiction here, a very intelligent cicada, and you're a philosopher cicada reflecting on the meaning of cicada life. And you notice, what do? Well, we sleep. We digest a little bit, we have sex, we die. And then the next generation of cicadas does the exact same thing. What is the meaning of this? What is the point of all this? It seems completely pointless, completely purposeless. It's not going anywhere. Okay? Now, those are the 7-year cicadas. Here we are, human beings. Is the story for us as human beings in principle any different? Well, we don't live 7 years, we live, say, 70 years or 77 years, so some multiple of that, but nonetheless we have a finite life cycle. We sleep, we eat, we have sex, we do a few other things, but then we die, and the next generation, they do the exact same sort of things over and over again. What's the point? Doesn't it seem rather pointless? And for the existentialists, many existentialists then, confronting the mortality of life, have the same reaction that lots of people have confronting the fact of human mortality. If we're going to die after a certain finite point of time, what is the point of life? It seems rather pointless and meaningless if we are mortal.